On this episode of China Unscripted, after escaping North Korea and China, defector Yeonmi Park discovered communism right here in America. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Jung.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
And joining us today once again is Yeonmi Park. She's been on the show before. She's a North Korean defector. She escaped China, and she's an author. Yeonmi, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
It's so good to see you guys again.
Definitely. So the previous times we've had you on, we've talked about, life in North Korea and your escape to China and how horrible that was. But I'm curious today to talk a little bit about how you transitioned from, like the worst authoritarian societies in the planet, transition to the free society of South Korea and then later the United States. I mean, what was that process like?
Where do I begin? I still do think I'm still like adjusting. Every day I'm like shocked by many, many different things. So it's definitely a journey for me to get there. And I don't know if I'm going to ever become like American, but I'm trying my best.
What's a specific thing that shocked you recently after living in the West for several years?
Honestly, so yesterday I went out with my friend to a bar with my North Korean girlfriend, right? And then, a lot of girls were trying to make out with us. And initially we thought they were like girlfriends, right? We are very innocent. And then later they were trying to kiss us. I go, oh no.
You might have picked the wrong bar, Yeonmi.
It was a normal bar, but so like in North Korea, right, we don't know the concept of gay or lesbian. There's no vocabulary for it.
Are there bars in North Korea?
No.
This is a very different experience.
Yeah, the bar I got adjust to, but that part I was very flattered. This is lovely, but we still, do not, I think she and I wasn't fully aware that here how normal that thing was.
Yeah, I have that same problem too when I go to a bar. It's just
all the girls try to kiss you?
Yeah, and I just have to be like, look, this is strange for me, adjusting to a free society.
It's so embarrassing.
Well, I can see how that's a culture shock. Because North Korea, they don't really teach you about human sexuality, I'm betting.
That's the thing, like the romantic love isn't something celebrated in the society. It's something, frowned upon. Like even current generation, when people fall in love and get married, people like mock at them. And they think that's a very bad thing. It had to be set up by the party or by parents, by neighbors, right? Through that way people meet. So I'm sure Shelley knows Mao time, they were not like encouraging people to date and talking about love.
I guess you could be united by your revolutionary love of Mao Zedong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the reason why you have to be united and become a joint family. That was your goal you need to share.
Have babies for Mao.
But of course, like the
or not have babies for Mao.
I don't know if this is the case in North Korea, but in China during the Maoist times, it was like people would still fall in love and have premarital sex. It just was like something everybody did, but no one talked about because it was officially frowned upon, just kind of like fairly commonplace.
Wow. Interesting. In North Korea, or?
Yeah, is that the case in North Korea, or was
he was talking about China?
Yeah.
So, yes. So now it's changing a lot, and because now in the past, like when I was even there, people were like loyal to the regime. I sincerely loved the leader, right? Like I sincerely could have died for him. But now I'm meeting like a lot of Korean defectors who were born in 2000. I don't know how people possibly be born then, but they are. So those young kids are coming out and say, they don't care. Just the only reason they follow the rules is to survive, because the punishment got a lot heavier. I don't know if you guys follow the news. Recently, Kim Jong-un declared the war against the K-pop. So he said that the worst thing people can do is watching K-pop.
Well, even a clock is right twice a day.
You mean a broken clock?
A broken clock is right twice a day.
So true.
I can see that why Kim Jong Un would not like K-pop because I bet
Why do you think that?
well, if you just look at the history also of communism in Eastern Europe and kind of what led to a lot of the fall of communism, some of it was based in religions, like the Christian churches were definitely like a huge like bed of like resistance against communism, but also Western culture, rock and roll culture. Like this is the 80s, 70s and 80s, right? So blue jeans, rock and roll, Bruce Springsteen, like these things were considered forbidden in, places like Romania, East Germany, the USSR, and a lot of young people would secretly listen to them. They got their news from the shortwave radio from like Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and they'd listen to, secret cassette tapes of rock and roll because like that kind of rebellious, like that kind of energy was a threat to an authoritarian regime and it was something they couldn't control. So I can imagine that K-pop, I bet a lot of people in North Korea, right? When you were there, you were saying you watched Titanic, right? And that changed how you looked at things. I'm sure there are a lot of people now, young people, like secretly watching K-pop or listening to K-pop. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, even in China, when my parents were young, there was a Taiwanese singer named Teresa Tung, and her music was banned in China because she was Taiwanese. And also she sang a lot of covers of American songs and different things too. And so my parents and like people in their generation, they would pass around like cassette tapes, like bootleg cassette tapes of her music, even though it was forbidden. So yeah, I can totally understand the K-pop thing.
So the thing is like China, right? Right now under current CCP and even Iran or Cuba, people have access to K-pop or like any kind of genre of entertainment. So, but then does that lead to a revolution? It doesn't seem like it. So that's why I'm saying like almost like Kim Jong-un's fear of foreign information is almost paranoia. Like there is no guarantee watching K-pop gonna start the revolution and demanding your freedom. So do you think so? Like, I don't know. Is it like worth of his paranoia?
I don't think.
I don't know. When I listen to K-pop, I do have an urge to kill.
Well, I was gonna say like, I don't think the Soviet Union fell because of rock and roll
or jeans
or David Hasselhoff, even though he should take some credit
for the Berlin Wall falling. Yeah.
But but it was a part of it, right? And I think what you have is the Soviet Union had on one hand, they'd been at this Cold War with the U.S. and this very, very expensive weapons buildup against the United States. So the regime was really depleted in a way that left people increasingly unhappy in terms of their material lifestyle. And then on top of that, you had Gorbachev, who had already been suggested this idea of perestroika and this idea that Western things, and glasnost, the idea like Western things could be like okay. And so like on one hand, people were increasingly miserable as the Soviet Union was depleted. Number two, they had access to Western culture. And I think it was the combination of these two things and probably a few other factors that allowed that to happen. But if you look at China, China's not depleted, right? China has a lot of material resources because, American investors are giving it to them, right? And so you can have as much, BTS, K-pop in China as you want. That itself is not going to cause the regime to fall. So I think the question for Kim Jong-un might be more like, if he feels that his regime is so weak and depleted and people are so unhappy in every other aspect of their lives, then like anything could be that catalyst, right? So K-pop or, Titanic or whatever movies come out in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think China is a different situation now than, the Soviet Union or a lot of things because of I think the Chinese Communist Party realized after 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre basically, is that they had to control the hearts and minds of people a different way. So they started that whole patriotic education campaign, and they were able to use nationalism in a way that was very effective, so that now a lot of Chinese people, like, pride in being Chinese is kind of like caught up with the Chinese Communist Party. And because they're, like Matt said, so economically successful, most people, I mean, I think there's still like a lot of kind of dissatisfaction in Chinese society, but it's not like it was in Eastern Europe, when you had the bread lines and you had Western things were a symbol of like some kind of hope for them. And so Chinese people are now taught that like the Chinese Communist Party, like China under socialism with Chinese characteristics, is superior to the Western model. So and when you have like Chinese, like rich Chinese students come to the West with driving their Porsches and stuff like that, they don't see America as a place of freedom. They just kind of see it as not as good as, where they came from.
Well, so I guess the question, Yeonmi, about North Korea would be that, for people living in North Korea now, do they feel that their lives are getting better and that there's hope within the North Korean system? And if so, K-pop maybe doesn't matter, right? So how are people in North Korea feeling?
So yeah, it's I do talk to people in North Korea, and also I talk to people work. The officials got out of North Korea legally with the official permit, working in Russia and China. I talk to them very regularly. Nobody has a faith in the system, including the elites, not to mention the people in the bottom. The only reason for me is like, now I understand why they're maintaining it, even as an elite, is that fear, right? If they escape, then their 3 generations of their family are gonna be executed. And the poor people, they want to get out, but they can't, because the border is now seared with, right? The country cannot afford electricity, puts these high electrified fences on the border with the machine guns, and that was not enough. They were burying landmines on the entire border of North Korea. So the entire country is now seared. It became a prison camp. So that's the thing. Nobody has a faith, and just all they have is fear, and that's the thing. Like, Kim Jong-un executes way more people than anybody, and the rates of execution is going up and up because he just really has nothing left to do controlling the people. And I don't know, like, is that maybe fear isn't enough to control the people? Right? In the past, they were at least try to pretend they were the beloved mother party. We are thankful to have them, but they don't even pretend anymore. Like, if you disagree, I'm gonna kill you.
Hearing that, it's just, I always think about this guy you interviewed one day. I don't think we ever did anything with the interview, but you interviewed a guy in New York who was talking about how much better North Korea was than the United States of America.
Yeah, he is an American guy.
Yeah, and how he would much rather live in North Korea.
Or as he called it, the DPRK.
Yeah.
I actually remember I showed you this clip on my phone a couple years ago in Oslo, Yeonmi.
Should we play it?
Yeah, let's just play that clip.
All right, we're going to play that clip right now.
Yeah.
Do you think North Korea or America is a better place to live?
It's certainly the DPRK. I mean, people don't starve to death in the DPRK like they do here every day. I mean, how many people in poor parts of the United States have starved to death since we started this rally today? How many people have starved to death in Appalachia? How many people have starved to death in Harlem? There are more homeless people there are more empty houses than homeless people in the United States.
So that's crazy. Have you met anyone like that in the United States who like just has this completely, I don't know, what do you call it, brainwashed view of like communism in North Korea?
Or not brainwashed, maybe they're delusional, they're insane, they're literally crazy. Otherwise, how can you? So it's not I just met them. Do you know all these people saying I'm a CIA spy, I'm a liar, I'm a fake, blah, blah. Those are the people dedicated their life to destroy me. And I mean, they come to a lot of the conferences and one of them threw milkshake to Do you remember Tae Young-ho, who
Yeah.
North Korean diplomat escaped in Oslo when he was attending? They knew who he was and threw a milkshake at him in Oslo, Norway.
And that wasn't a North Korean guy. I think I was like around the corner when that happened. It wasn't a North Korean guy. It was like some Norwegian
No.
dude
Who
throwing
Yeah, it was
milkshakes
some white guy.
on behalf of Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So, but the thing is, this kind of love for North Korean leadership is in a way stronger from the outsiders. Because for insiders, we know the oppression, we know how hard it is, how brutal the dictatorship is. But then when it comes to defending the ideology of Juche and North Korean regime, in a way, those guys are actually true believers. And I don't know how Kim Jong-un did it. It's gonna be my forever mystery. How the heck did they do it to these foreigners and made them become this kind of true believers?
I mean, there's just something about Kim Jong-un. He's so attractive.
Oh, boy.
I know.
Was it that well, I mean, so when people, North Korean defectors like you, come out and talk about what it's like in North Korea, their response is that you're a CIA spy. Is that
Yeah, they say I get paid by CIA. I'm lying. I'm opportunist. And yeah, so that's what their narrative is. And I'm the puppet of the Western propaganda. So that's what I am. I became a puppet for the Western countries right now. So that's what they say.
It's the worst to be accused of being a CIA puppet and then not actually get any CIA funding. Am I right, Chris?
I can relate. I can really relate.
That's the thing, like, where is the CIA, by the way? Why they never call me, right? I'm sure they know who I am by now, but they never, ever call me. Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, the reputation doesn't quite meet the reality. But so recently you were on the Jordan Peterson podcast, which is a fantastic interview. I recommend it to everyone watching.
Oh, thank you.
And I believe during it you said something like your time at Columbia University in New York. There were things happening there that were crazier than North Korea.
Yeah.
So what is that? Like, that seems because we talk about this guy who thinks North Korea is great.
Yeah.
But what is happening in North
in
North
North
Korean,
Columbia?
in the Democratic People's State of Colombia.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like, some people got so emotional, like, why do you compare to North Korea to America? But I was actually comparing America's extreme left culture to North Korea. I was more specifying, not America in general, right? So that is the first clarification. And I mean, where do I even begin? So before class at Columbia, I was there for 4 years. Every single class starts with saying your pronouns first, then your name. So imagine if it's like 90 people lecture hall. You hear what their pronouns are and their names are, what they're studying. Instead of me trying to understand what their desires are, who they are as a person, I am obsessed to remembering their pronouns. So I don't become a bigot and come off as a person who is not inclusive or thoughtful enough. Think about the mental energy waste, right? And these people like gender fluid. So they say, I'm gender fluid. So they can say, this morning, before the class, I feel like a man. But now at the end of class, I feel like a woman. How the heck do I know that? How they feel like at the mood? So how do I ever, predict what they're going to feel like at the moment?
Well, surely for somebody like you whose English isn't their first language, wasn't there like any kind of, wouldn't they have cut you some slack? Like, I know, like in Chinese, he and she, it sounds the same. And so in English, I know a lot of Chinese people who mix up he and she.
Mix up he and she all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just being very inclusive and gender fluid.
But so, yeah, surely they must have would have cut you some slack, right?
No. So this is the thing. I'm in Korea the same. Like you know, like he or she, the same. You like me, right? You in Korea the same. But the thing is here, like now I still have to learn how to say they in my sentence as a pronoun. I'm still not good at it. And one day, he was, born guy, but they, it's still confusing. He or they told me it's ridiculous.
Why are you having a problem with this? It's simple.
This is why it's crazy. How this is not crazy, right? I'm like, so they told me, like, why am I not doing it right? And almost like crying, right? I mean, I think they thought I was like systemically like oppress them, not acknowledging who they are. And I'm trying my best. So it made me like not wanting to talk to anybody after all.
So some people took issue and got upset.
Yeah, and they told me directly at the end of the class, and they were so like tearing eyes. And this poor day was so offended. So I'm like, this is crazy. I still cannot do this thing in my sentence after 4 years of practicing. But this is not the only thing. Professor literally sends you email before the class. Oh, we are going to talk about this material. This material talks about why colonialism, white supremacy, racism, injustice, rape, victim, all of that. So if this triggers you, don't do the reading. Don't even come to class. And in the middle of the class, if it triggers you, just leave the class. Don't even need to tell me. So that's every warning that professors give you. But then why the heck do you spend this fortune and 4 years of your life go there if you are not there to study and searching for the truth, right?
Well, for them, it's their parents' money, so it's not as much of an issue.
But I mean, these people and complaining about those student loans, right? Like they say we are getting debt to go to university, but then when they go to university, if it triggers them, they don't want to learn about it. So then I don't understand the point of education, first of all. Then all these other things, right? I mean, I was talking to my professor one day, and she was saying the fact that you are letting men to hold the door is showing them that man is overpowering you. Their aggression, because they can like, I mean, that's the thing. That's how extreme they are. The fact that you're holding a door for somebody is an oppression for a woman. So I was saying, no, I'm holding a door for women. Like, having a manner, right? Being thoughtful. And then she was like, Yeonmi, you're brainwashed. So that's every time I challenge my professor, they just go there. You're brainwashed. That's why you're thinking this way. I mean, even North Koreans wouldn't do that. Even North Koreans wouldn't come up with this narrative. Every single thing comes to white men, the horrible thing, the most horrible thing that destroys the world. Yeah, they were in a way hating white men, the Western civilization, more intensely than North Koreans do at this point.
Really?
Yes, at some point I was thinking, am I in North Korea or am I in America, right? What an irony. Like, I escaped that country, now ended up in this country where I have to intensely hate Americans, right? Intensely hate everything about the Western democracy. That's what they do at Columbia.
This is what they're being taught.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, the Columbia has this course studying Western civilization of music and art. So every class, they say, before the class, so who has a problem study Western civilization music? And everybody raising their hand. And they're saying is, because of the Western men, right, the white guys colonized Asia and Africa, they messed up entire humanity. So now they silenced all those talented minority women artists. Now we have to ending up studying these bigots like Mozart and Beethoven. So I was thinking, well, after all, this is the West. And in Korea, when we study Korean music, we wouldn't say that, right?
Oh, Yeonmi, you're brainwashed. I'm
Exactly.
So sorry.
Exactly. So I was saying, like, what? I mean, this West is a part of human history. What is like wrong with studying part of history, right? And this is the West after all. And everyone's like looking at me. I'm like alien to them. And all they can just come up with is, oh, you're brainwashed. And like, I'm like hopeless to them. And eventually I just had to shut up. And so I can pass the class and graduate, right? There's no point for me to argue with every single one of them who will never believe me.
I mean, were you ever like, hey, I grew up in North Korea. I was a slave in China. Let me tell you what real problems are. Did that ever factor in?
Well, I tried to share my experience, right? Like the actual rape, actual oppression, actual slavery that happening in this contemporary world, not something happened like many hundreds of years ago. But the thing is, like, for them, I mean, for them, it's so weird. The oppression they feel is so real. They feel like the white men out to get them in any second. I think that's the thing. that was the thing. After 4 years, these people are not just pretending to be oppressed. They actually feel oppressed. They they feel actually terrified because they are brainwashed. They think there's an enemy. Those white men are trying to kill them all. So that's how I understood. Like when we think we are living in the external or physical world, but we live in our brain. In their brain, though they are living in this war zone, right? So it was so sad to these kids. Like why they have so much. They are the best generation of entire humanity. We've never been prosper like this. Like if you are not grateful now, nobody should have ever been grateful. This is the best time to be alive, especially if you are in and like living in New York City in this 21st century. But then they feel like they are the most oppressed people in this entire human history. I mean, where do we blame that? Where are we going after this? With this generation of people, they think they are the victims.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. You know, I was thinking at Columbia University. My dad went to Columbia, and I think he started in 1950. And one of the first classes he took as a freshman was a class called accent reduction, because he had a strong Brooklyn accent. And so the idea at the time, and this is 1950, so 70 years ago, that like if you had too strong of an accent, you couldn't get a job or fit in. So the idea was to try to help people like get rid of that sort of thing. And now, like, imagine a class like that. It would be considered like oppression to try to help people get rid of unintelligible accents, right?
That is so true. Yeah, that is so true.
Well, so what was this like for you? Like you escaped North Korea, you escaped China. Finally, you're in the free world.
Yeah.
What's it like to be what happened? Like you surely you must have been like, oh, this is great to be here, and then you see this. That must have caused like a big disconnect.
Yeah, so that is the first time I learned that actually in life you need a problem, real problem, because not having a problem is a problem. And these people never had the problems. Now they're in this, right? I mean, they find every single thing to be offended. That's all they're spending their energy on. They spend entire their brain power to be offended and triggered. Like even, I mean, they say, oh, why can't you not pronounce my name like properly, right? They're coming from some absurd country that I never heard of. And then demanding that I need to pronounce their language like the native speaker. I mean, I don't care when people call him like Yami or Yomi, whatever it is, right? It's like they never spoke Korean in their life. And I mean, why is that a reason you need to be offended? So now professors, demanding you to send them recording of your own name before the class. So they study the name instead of trying their best to teach you how actually to think about the problem, how to understand history. Instead of that, they are spending their energy to show how inclusive they are by studying your name with your physical recording of your name. And this is a place of, the great thinkers that supposedly come from. Right? Like people go to Colombia, a lot of them gonna become the leaders of this world. And this is the worldview, this is justice they understand. They think this is justice, right? This is human rights. And these people like talking about human rights, like you don't know what human rights violation look like, actually, right? You don't know like
you
oppression.
Do.
But they don't believe me. They don't. So yeah, that was the most bizarre, and it so saddens me. One thing I learned is like I'm not gonna send my son to these like insane schools, and it makes me not wanting my son to go to any public school at this point. And another thing is like I used to be so hopeful about this America, right? This is the land of the free, the home of the brave, the future of humanity, the beacon of hope. All these things I believe. Now I'm like, oh, we are doomed. We are really doomed here now.
Well, have you seen this kind of thing outside of Columbia? Like, I'd like to think America isn't doomed because Columbia University is horrible.
Well, so I thought so, right? I literally thought these kids go to Columbia, become radicalized. when they graduate and then they go to like these companies and paying taxes, they're gonna come to their senses, right? By paying taxes. But no, I met so many people working for Facebook, Twitter, all these big tech companies, especially tech companies, even like Google, right? I don't want to generalize people, a lot of them, like 98% of them that I met from those companies didn't get over that. They are so much about feeling this oppression they fear. And they told me, why do you go to Texas? And I'm like, it's a country. There are people there, right? It's America. There are people that I need to reach. And they're like, they don't want to go below a certain line because they think those are people's Trump supporters. So they don't ever want to set their foot on that kind of territory. These are the people in their 40s, are high executives at like these big tech companies. And that's why I was like, yeah, they don't get over it. That was a myth that I thought they were getting over, but they don't. And that's why we see so much censorship on YouTube. I mean, now we're talking with big platforms now, but like so much censorship everywhere because these people actually believe that you need to censor others in order to achieve the just they see, right? The way they think what is just, it by silencing others.
Well, it sounds so strange to me because, like, a lot of these people you're talking about, this in like media and tech that you've spoken to, probably were reaching out to you because they wanted to help get your story out there, to talk about the kind of oppression that happens in the world. But then they don't see that a lot of the things they're promoting are also creating injustice and inequality.
No, they don't connect the dot. That's how dumb this whole thing is, right? I mean, I spoke at TED, like people go to TED are wonderful. They have amazing hearts, right? They really want to change the world. But then how they want to change the world is censoring individual like liberty, right? Limiting individual liberty. But then they learn that in their university and school, I think all their life, that's how you achieve social justice. So I don't think in their hearts, by censoring, like canceling Trump, canceling all these people, is a injustice they are creating. They think they are doing the right thing. They truly believe that they think they are saving the world by doing that.
Which is so interesting because a lot of this sounds like essentially like Marxist or communist ideology in the United States. It sounds like the same sorts of things that they were saying, back in the Soviet Union at the beginning or back in China at the beginning. Even Pol Pot was talking about equality, creating equality in society. And it really seems that the trick to that is it seems like it does take advantage of the fact that most people are good people and want to help other people. It just then twists it into something so devious.
Yeah, that is the thing. Like, I mean, in order to start a communism revolution, if you don't have true believers, it's impossible, right? So something about this Marxism is very appealing to good people with good intentions. But how they want to change the world and making each other better, right? How they want to help others, they don't know that actually brings destruction eventually. And that's the thing. That's why this ideology never dies. It's keep trying. Whenever it brings destruction, it's keep going afterwards. And now even in America, right? They're trying this ideology. They are dying to try this thing so that we all can die and starve to death. That's the thing. Like, that's why I keep thinking about human nature. Like, humans are not logical. This is fascinating to me, right? Like, humans are not logical. Like animals, we are not.
I mean, we're very emotional, and I think that's what a lot of this kind of preys on. Like what you're saying, Chris, about people wanting to be good, or what you're saying, Yeonmi, about people really in their heads and their hearts kind of feeling oppressed. Like it's really like very, very emotional. And I mean, you see that over and over again in communist societies, like the Cultural Revolution in China. It was all like, just like, I mean, people look back at that period of time in their lives and they think like we just all went crazy because like it was just such a time of like heightened emotion and like kind of this like mob frenzy, mob justice, and like people kind of like don't even recognize themselves when they look back at that because like it was like the entire society just like went insane for 10 years. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's interesting is a lot of people, they're seeing problems in American society, and they are often real problems. And what they're doing is they're saying to themselves, well, the best way to fix this is to give the government the power to make the arbitrary decisions necessary to help this group, including help this group at the expense of this other group, right? Now, obviously, there's the problem of like dividing people into somewhat arbitrary groups. And you can, debate about whether race is an arbitrary group, right? And I think that just depends on your worldview. But the thing that really gets me is it's like, let's give the federal government lots of power to make arbitrary decisions.
Power and money.
But it's like, did we not just go through 4 years of half the country hating the president? And now we want to give the government the like enormous power? Like, what's going to happen, in 4 years or 8 years when, you get Republican presidents, I don't know, Ron DeSantis or whatever it is, right? Then like people are going to be like, oh, oops, maybe we shouldn't have given the government all that power. And so just like this disconnect between wanting to do what's right for people and then giving enormous power to like this giant bureaucracy that can use, like you're giving them tools. So like whoever is in power is going to use those tools for what they want to use the tools for. And this is what happens in socialist and communist countries where, like full communism is essentially the government or the party is so powerful it controls literally every aspect of every single person's life, right? Like North Korea, like where where you live, what apartments you get, the job you have, the amount of food you have, the people you can talk to, who you can marry.
Don't forget the haircut.
The haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind because what I've always wanted is a Kim Jong-un haircut. But like other than that, it's very oppressive, right? So like the more power you give the government, the more oppressive it will inevitably be.
Well, I think this is why the United States has always been the enemy of communism abroad, because the United States, everything about how the United States was founded was created in a way to give people as much power and keep power out of the hands of the government. It was based on the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so you have communism with its ideology specifically geared towards destroying a society and putting power in the hands of a few.
That's the thing and what I just keep thinking. In a way, right, like when I have been like never taking responsibility in North Korea, because like you said, by giving all the rights to the government, in a way they promise that you never have to be responsible for anything. Now, as a government, you're going to take everything care of for you. So maybe that's why I think it's very appealing to people in here right now, right? They just want to give every right they have to the government, then which means they don't have to be responsible for their behaviors.
They can be taken care of.
Yeah, because freedom is not easy. Like it was so hard. I remember when I was in South Korea, like freedom was so hard. They were saying, so what are you going to do with your life? And like, now do I have to think about that? Well, in North Korea, you never had to think about what am I going to do with my life? And then I was like, maybe I will go to school. I'm a teenager, right? Then like, what are you going to study? But really do I have to choose that? Because in North Korea, they tell you if you go to school, what school go to, what you study. There's no such a thing you choose your major in North Korea, right? Regime tell you, you're going to study art, you're going to study chemistry, engineering, right? You're going to study gymnastics. So now I'm like, okay, maybe I have to decide my major, but then what do you want to do as a job? Like, really? To have to think about that too? It was so overwhelming. Not only that, like when I go to shop, there are 100 different types of pants, right? Jeans, leggings, shorts, like mini shorts. And in North Korea, no, it was regulated. Government tell you this is the type of pants you can only wear. So I never had to think what kind of pants I want to wear. And I was thinking like, oh my God, if I get a frozen, like potato and I have a guarantee not getting executed, I would go back to North Korea. And in fact, some North Koreans do go back. After finding freedom so hard, they do go back. That is how that's the thing. Like we should have more respect for the people who want to be free, because then you gotta think for yourself. Then like you have to be responsible for the choice that you are making, right? You gotta be. And I think here that's the thing, like all about the responsibility, and they don't want to take, and just so they want to give it to the government, and then like, oh, they just want to be voluntarily want to slave to the government.
Wow. It's well, you look at like the Soviet Union or well any authoritarian regime in history, and like I've always wondered, like how does a society get to that point? And it's usually not overnight. It's not like suddenly a dictator has an army and just takes over. Especially with communism, like this ideology starts to spread, and then suddenly things get out of control. So this is what you used the word communist revolution earlier. Is that kind of what you see happening in the United States?
Oh yeah, totally. What do you think is happening in Portland right now? I mean, what do you think is happening in Chicago right now? It is totally they think destroying and stealing from Gucci and Chanel is a justice, right? This is what today's justice looks like in America. I'm like, this social justice warriors, right? Their war is stealing bags from Chanel. And I think in a way, even the fact about their obsession with the gender, right? Like X chromosome, Y chromosome, facts doesn't matter anymore. Like it's all about how you feel. Like as Shirley said, it's all about how you feel. If you feel like a unicorn, you are a unicorn. At this point, right? That's like the world that we are going into. And I think the fact that they believe that this country was built upon idea of racism and hatred and white supremacy, they want to tear down every single part of fabric of this country and the world, and they want to rebuild. But in order to rebuild their communist or social paradise, they gotta destroy first. So that's why they're going after every single thing right now. Like they're literally going after every single thing. Even the fact like the genetics, the X chromosome, Y chromosome, so obvious, it's not obvious anymore.
That is what Marx says in the Communist Manifesto. You have to destroy all pre-existing social conditions.
Exactly. That's it. So that's where we are going to. And in a way, this is more intense than North Korean communism revolution, is because it's social media is so powerful, right? You can so effectively brainwash people and like spread this ideology. In the past, when the communism was happening, they had to go to town and talk to people, gather them, right? But now you don't have to. You just have to use social media. So in a way, it can happen so quickly. It doesn't have to, like North Korea takes decades. It can happen literally in a few years' time, we are done. They just won the battle, right? So I think the acceleration of change, even the division. When I came to America, it wasn't this crazy, literally. I don't think I heard anybody, they don't want to set a foot into like the land like Florida or Texas because of the bigots, the Trump supporters. Never heard that. Now I hear that all the time from the people in SF or like LA, New York. They get shocked, like, why do you go to Texas? I'm like, I'm not going to North Korea. Why is it shocking to you? But me going to Texas, almost like I'm going to North Korea to them at this point.
Wow.
When did you come to the U.S., Yeonmi?
Well, I was visiting a lot in 2015 and then moved in January 2016.
So that's only a couple of years.
Yeah, but that wasn't like that bad. It wasn't.
So what do you think, what lessons as a survivor of communism yourself do you think you have to offer to Americans?
So honestly, right, like sometimes when this nutties, right, we're so ungrateful, so bitter, and has zero appreciation for history, what our ancestors did, what humanity went through to bring us here. The fact that we are alive here, someone like had to fight for us in the jungle many generations ago, right? Fighting with starvation. I was like, maybe you guys deserve this punishment, like destruction, right? You gotta be starved like in North Korea, then you're gonna come to your senses, knowing how grateful you are, how grateful like this amazing this US Constitution is. But the thing is, I know that they are misled, right? There were professors, there were people misleading them. And they are also, in a way, are actual victims of this entire, whoever drives it, I don't know why they are doing this, but somebody is behind all of this. A lot of people funding, even George Soros, like he's spending billions of dollars to destroy everything. So I think only thing that we learned is that from China, especially what I learned is that economic freedom does not bring political freedom. Something so unique thing about freedom is that you must fight for it. It must be fought. So you have it. And I think that's it. Like in America, only thing that we have left to do is fighting for freedom in this country. It's so funny, like until even last year, I was talking about freedom in North Korea, right? Fighting for freedom in North Korea. Now I'm suddenly fighting for my freedom in America, my freedom of speech, not getting cancer. Like, it's like maybe I was thinking, do I bring a dictatorship? Is it my karma? Maybe wherever I go, I bring them with me. If I do, I'm so sorry. This is what I did to this country. Yeah.
Maybe you could move to Canada for us.
No, it's already a mess there.
It's already happening there. So.
Yeah. But yeah, that is so ironic. Like, you come out of North Korea and like you have this message about what life was like in North Korea and how horrible it was. And now it's almost like you're telling Americans how to be American.
So I'm like, because of the fact it's such a humbling position, I don't think I understand true value of even freedom myself, right? It's so much beyond any human can understand what this does to how much it empowers human beings. It's beyond anything. But these people don't see tiny bit of benefit of being free. That is unbelievable. They don't see, they see the side effects of being free so well, but they never see the pros of being free, even one thing about it.
Yeah, it's like that analogy about like the fish doesn't know what water is because it just is in it all the time,
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I often think that immigrants to America are often the best Americans, right? Because they've experienced something else and they've chosen to come here, and then they have a kind of framework from which to evaluate America and appreciate the things that America has that they didn't have before.
Very fiercely patriotic. A lot of them become very fiercely patriotic Americans. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think if you just grow up in it, you just don't even notice it, right? So you don't you don't appreciate it, like you said, because you just and then if you're taught to just focus on kind of like the systemic injustices, and was the thing that Obama used to say that was kind of the whole like to form a more perfect union. So, America has always been imperfect, but we're always working on it and getting better. Like to be taught that that's not actually the case, that it's, rotten to the core and always has been and
only getting worse
and will never get better. Then that makes you a hopeless person.
Right. I mean, the irony is like, we've just celebrated Juneteenth, right? Which is like this day about that celebrates America's end of slavery, right? And it's like, think about how amazing that is, that we had this horrible institution, we fought a war, and then we ended it. And like the Juneteenth is like the day that the Union troops went into Texas and emancipated the slaves. And so like we're literally celebrating a change from horrible to way better. And like obviously there were many problems for a long time after that did, have, I think gradually improved significantly, especially since the civil rights movement. But like, is this not an indication that we are forming a more perfect union?
Exactly. I'm like, that's like, how this is not enough. Like this is enough, right? You guys, it's that's the thing. The education, the purpose of education is this: learning about history, right? Learning what we had made a mistake, like all of those things. That's what you're supposed to do when you go to university. But they actually ended up very twisted about reality. I don't think that's the thing. Like their reality is so twisted almost like they're in a different like planet than like you, right? Like what history book did you read, right? Like what I mean, so I don't know, but how are they so good at like making the reality so delusional? Like North Korean regime is so good at it, using a one actual fact. It is a fact, but using it, spinning in a way that is just makes the entire thing a different story.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the media jumping on this. Like, you know, there's been the big debate about critical race theory happening now. And like on CNN, they're saying like, oh, you know, the far right is trying to prevent slavery being taught in schools. And that's not what people are arguing about. They're arguing about critical race theory, but they just reframe it in a way that's a total lie. Mm-hmm. And since the media is the bastions of truth, who's there to challenge them?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, on top of who's there to challenge it, it's like if you know, we're in New York City, which is a pretty liberal place. And, you know, if you challenge an idea that's pretty much pushed in the media and is common, and you challenge it here, like on the streets of New York City, like, you don't know, like maybe someone will go after you for expressing your idea, right? Or beat you up or something.
Yeah.
And so, or, you know, the Columbia University equivalent, which would be like canceling or getting you demarked or whatever it is that they do, right? So there's this enormous social pressure to then not question a certain view. And so, you know, there actually may be a lot of people who disagree, but over time, the inability to raise that issue or the inability to ask critical thinking questions, then for some people, they just stop thinking about it altogether. Others, they just are just afraid to ever express it. And so you end up with the overall environment being one that is not conducive to independent thought, but rather everyone just feels more comfortable going along with whatever the prevalent narrative is.
Mm-hmm.
So we can all live in delusion together, and then we're all harmonious.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, have you been getting any backlash for talking about these things? I mean, you were on the Jordan Peterson podcast. Some people hate that guy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's the thing, like, right? Like, I remember, so my story with Dr. Peterson was back in when I had a baby in 2018, I think. One day I was walking the summer downtown Chicago. Huge, this like auditorium theater. Huge letter, Jordan Peterson sold out. I never heard that name before, right? Like, it was like on the weekday too. And who sells out the entire thing like that? And my ex back then, we were walking, and then they were like selling tickets, like very high price in front of the door. And then we bought a ticket and we entered the room. Fully packed. And actually, yeah, a lot of men were there. And Dr. Peterson has no slides, talking about 12 rules for life, right? Going through the rule number 1, 2. And these people crying in tears. I've never seen anything like that for like 2-3 hours lecture in that big hall. And that's when I thought, I mean, if there was a time, right, like if Socrates was alive or Steve Jobs alive, we have a saying like, how much would you pay to have a lunch with them? So he was that kind of person to me, right? I'm like living with the greatest thinkers of my time. How much would I pay to have lunch with him? So when he like asked for interview, I was so honored, but like I couldn't believe how much hate he was getting. But I also couldn't believe how much hate I get. It makes all sense. But afterwards, especially this time with the Fox, instead of people saying, a lot of my actual friends that like I used to say I love you, all those friends now telling me I am concerned. And I understand because they used to do a project with me and their names are associated with me in the past. So now I think they're trying to protect themselves because they are also public figures. In a way, I understand. But then in a way, I don't understand because these people are the ones talking about justice and how hypocrite they are. Now, the first thing they want to do is protecting themselves, not associating with a bigot like me. And I mean, of course, random people like tell you F you, like go die, you're the fake. And then a lot of people challenge, why did you have to talk about that on Fox News? And I'm like, Fox was the only one who called me on this, right? If New York Times calls me right now, I will be on New York Times. Like, I will be on CNN. This news was like, this Fox thing covered South Korea, like 50 articles came out. New Zealand, Australia, all other countries wrote about my article. None, CNN, New York Times, MSNBC, none in mainstream covered even one single thing about that article. It was like
Wow.
as if they just pretend that didn't happen, right? It was a big thing in every other country, every other platform. So I'm like, it's not like I want to go on Fox. I appreciate Fox. Thank you, Fox News. But then I want to go on BBC too. I want to go on all other people, but then they don't call me. So here I am telling them I'm willing to talk to everybody about this. And this is the thing, like how the fact that I spoke about this on Fox News, that was enough reason for them to never believe me. That's the thing. It's like, yeah, I can forgive you for having that view, but then why was it Fox News? I'm like, so they say you are being used by this propaganda machine, right? So like, for you are being used. I'm like, like people like you know me. I went through hell. I'm not being used. I know how to like control myself. So that was almost like they are denial about it. That's the thing. Because what I was talking, I think was hitting their home in some ways, but it was too uncomfortable. Instead, they are looking for the reasons why I'm a liar, why they don't want to like think about this, right? One is I spoke to Fox News. That's enough reason. And second is, like also comparing, I mean, so they thought still like there was no guns pointing at you at Colombia. So how is it worse than North Korea? But in a way, I was saying the lose of common sense, the chaos in morality was nuttier than North Korea. That's what I meant. Not when it comes actually the punishment, but there is a chaos in morality, right? At Colombia right now, there's never a wrong and bad, like good anymore. You can never do a wrong as an individual now, right? In their scenario, you can be anything, you can feel any way, everything is justified.
You can be wrong. You can go on Fox News.
Yeah. So, but like as long as you are not challenging their view, you can never be wrong. Within their system, everybody is accepted, right? So but the thing most heartbreaking thing was that from the people who I cared about, who I've been friends for many years, I cannot talk about who they are because they are public people, and saying that trying to like cover their reputation, the first thing is that it is shocking, and like this hypocrisy is sickening to me. All these people, they say, oh, I care about Black Lives Matter, like I care about women's rights, blah blah. They try to fit in so they can get a job and they can like do right. They can do good for themselves. And like I don't know actually how many people care about social justice issue at this point.
Gosh. I mean, all of this shit, like, Shelley, does this sound familiar to you in any way?
What are you implying, Chris?
China? Like, this sounds so familiar.
I mean, we've talked about it before in the show, the whole like guilt by association thing, the whole it's about who is making the argument or like not the actual argument. It's about the political correctness of where it's kind of very calculated to not just use actual punishment, but to use like social pressure and punishment.
I mean, I'm just thinking, like, in China, it's hard for us to understand now, but if somebody got labeled a counter-revolutionary, like, even their family and friends would have to, like, distance themselves from that person.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you had people literally reporting their parents.
Yeah.
And then their parents being executed, and then they thought they did the right thing,
And hey, the Biden new domestic security plan, he wants to have ways that people can report on their friends and family who might be having extremist
Don't worry about
views.
it, Chris. It's just, if you see something, say something, just like in the subway.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't a horrible spiral to the bottom.
I mean, that is, I think, one of the worst things about communist society is how it kind of breaks apart any type of social trust.
Yeah.
Like you cannot
Exactly.
trust your neighbors, you cannot trust your friends, you cannot trust your family members, right?
Yeah.
Like if you were thinking about leaving North Korea, right, who can you tell? You have to keep this all a secret. You cannot tell anybody what you're thinking in your mind,
Yeah.
right?
No.
Wasn't that
I
something
could.
you said your mom
I
told you, that your tongue was your most dangerous weapon or something?
Yeah. That's just like the most dangerous thing that you have in your body is your tongue. It can kill not just you, up to 3 to 8 generations of your family can get killed for that. But the thing is about that trust, right? That's when I learned when humans trust, we prosper. Western democracy, the foundation is trust, isn't it? Like even the fact that getting into Uber and not like believe that I'm not gonna get murdered and robbed, and like believe that I order pizza and they're not gonna put a poison in it and rocks in it. It's our trust. That's how we operate. If there's zero trust, I'm never gonna buy a pizza. They're never gonna sell me a pizza. Like I mean, what a horror world that is gonna be. So in North Korea, that's what they do. Like, if 3 of you guys are sitting there, Matt is watching Shelly, like Shelly is watching Chris, but Chris, is watching Matt. So you're being spied, and you're also spying on somebody. So even you're being such a good person, not gonna reporting on Shelly, but Matt is gonna report on you. But if Matt is not gonna report on you, he's being watched by Shelly. You're gonna be reported by somebody else. So everybody forced to report on each other.
Wait, so you guys have been watching me the whole time? Because I've been spying on you guys.
Well, Matt, you're
Yeah.
easy to look at.
Well,
Thanks, Chris.
yeah, I mean, this is crazy. I went to Berlin a couple years ago and went to the Stasi Museum, and
Sounds familiar.
which is the secret police in East Germany, right, under the communism. And it was insane to kind of go to this museum and see all these stories and like realize that basically, like at least 40% of German society, East German society, maybe more, were either spies or informants for the Stasi. So like, it's
crazy.
crazy. Like everybody knew at least somebody who was spying or reporting on them, and like this is just the way that they operated society. And then after the Soviet Union fell, after East Germany fell, you could go to these places and see, like they had the records opened, so you could go see who was spying for the Stasi, and
Oh,
there were
wow.
people
Who betrayed you?
there were people who didn't go because they said they just didn't want to know. Because they knew there would be friends or family or somebody very dear to them that had been doing it, and they decided they just didn't want to know who had been doing
Yeah.
it. It's kind of crazy to think about. I mean, when we came to the U.S., my mother told me when I started going to school, she was like, "Do not tell anybody anything that happens in our family. Like
Yeah.
at school, you just do not talk about anything."
Your
like,
mother who went through the Cultural
Yeah.
Revolution.
So like at the time, I was, I thought this was just like my mother's paranoia, like, and I was scared because I was like, what are we doing at home that I'm not supposed to tell people? But I realized many years later that this is the product of growing up in communism, is that,
Yeah.
she was looking at, I mean, my grandfather was arrested by the communists in the 80s. I mean, it wasn't that he had been like a dissident or anything, but he just got caught up in one of the many political campaigns.
I mean, he was an engineer or something, right?
Yeah, he worked at he was an engineer at a dam.
That's very political, Shelley.
Right. But like, one day his friends came to the door and said, "Hey, we got to talk to you outside for a minute." He went with them, didn't come back.
With friends too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think what's insane when you talk about in East Germany that 40% of the people were involved in spying in some way is that, like, how do you as an authoritarian regime get 40% of people to be willing to spy on their friends and neighbors? And I think the answer is, correct me if I'm wrong, but like they do it through convincing you that you're doing the right thing by turning people in. You're doing the right thing by spying on them. I mean, is that the case in North Korea where Kim Jong-un or the regime convinces people that turning in counter-revolutionaries or equivalents is the morally right thing?
But the thing is, they try to convince you that's the right thing to do, but then when they tell you to do, you have no option other than that. I mean, if the North Korea regime tells you do this, it's like no is never an option for us. We don't even know it's like no is such a thing. The party demands you to be dying right now in front of us, we kill ourselves, right? They demand absolute obedience from you. So for people, the concept of you can say no to authority is not a concept in our mind. Like whatever the authority says, they are right? Like whatever is it the animal farm? If the Napoleon thinks he's always right? He's always right. So that is so embedded in the minds of North Koreans. Like even it sounds so ridiculous. Like we never say, "Oh, that's wrong." So back then, especially when they demand you to spy on people, first, of course, they try. This is gonna keep our socialist revolution continue. But then also people cannot say, "No, I'm not gonna do it." I'm like, you gotta say yes, I'm gonna do it, right?
Well, and so now here you are in the U.S. saying no to all kinds of authority, including this crazy social pressure that's happening. And, like as I was saying earlier, like how do you get to be a society like East Germany, where 40% of the people are spying on each other? And Matt, I think you had a good point about it being because they trick people into thinking what they're doing is right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of it. But I think the other thing is, like Yeonmi said, you don't have a choice.
No.
Like you cannot, it's not just about making you believe. I mean, I think there always will be true believers, but there are going to be people who don't want to do it. But like, you don't want to spy on this other family, but if you don't, then they're going to come after your family.
Right. So it's like you believe it and you convince yourself that you're doing the right thing because the price of doing otherwise is just too great. Right. And it's like I can understand that the psychological compulsion to convince yourself that you are doing the right thing. So you get yourself to believe it because otherwise like you can't live with yourself for not being willing to stand up to the government or whatever.
Well, like Yeonmi, like you talking about these things, you going on a Fox News, that, you might lose a bunch of friends. You might lose opportunities to speak, opportunities to write books. Like there's a lot of things at risk for you because you're talking about things that are not necessarily politically correct.
Very incorrect. I mean, it's very clear. But I do know now at this point that the humans, right? Like the survivor instinct is very strong. Like we can tell ourselves stories. I mean, that's why I like named my book "In Order to Live." That we tell ourselves stories in order to live, right? I think like what Matt said, you can do that. You can rationalize in yourself, keep saying those things, and then don't feel horrible about yourself. But the thing is, in this communism, they don't teach you really morality, being a decent human. So by turning somebody in, it's not something you feel guilty about. I think that's the thing. Like I learned, humans are so good in like free word. In communism, I'm so sorry to say that, but humans are so evil. And in a way also because they never learned what being decent look like, what being decent means. So if I were like right now in North Korea, I never like read the books like by Dr. Peterson or like Animal Farm like 1984. I never had idea of learning these ideas, how to be a better human. I would totally turning in everybody on my way. And I would not even feel bad about it. That's like a human nature. That's the thing, like human is capable of doing anything, right? They can become Kim Jong-un, they can like do Holocaust to each other, right? And they can be so opposite, right? That's why it so shocks me that when the education fails to cultivate people to become decent and pursue morality, that's what it shocks me the most. Because in communism, there's no morality. It's not like there is a communist morality means like become a better revolutionary for the regime. So I don't know how it was in China. Like were there people bad who were turning in each other, or they were thought like they never even felt anything about it. Like, that's the thing. When I was seeing those executions and seeing people dying on the street, like I felt nothing. And like this is what I think I was talking with Dr. Peterson for a long time. Like I literally thought maybe I was a psychopath then. Like how could I possibly felt nothing, right? But now I feel them because now I know how you're supposed to feel. So It's so messed up.
Well, Marx called it the specter of communism, and I think he was dead on with that. It really is like this sort of demonic possession that just communism has been successful everywhere it's been tried. Its goal is to destroy society. Its goal is to bring about death and destruction.
Well, I mean, I also feel like Marx and Engels specifically wrote that in the Communist Manifesto, that the goal of communism is to destroy society.
They knew what they were doing.
Destroy morality, destroy religion. Like it's not an accident. It's like that's the thing they're explicitly saying.
Yeah.
It makes people horrible.
Well, I mean, I think also the goal is to replace those things, morality, religion, with communism, essentially, like with that ideology. It wasn't like what Mao was doing was not just like destroying the four olds because like he didn't like Chinese traditions, even though he was like a giant hypocrite and actually believed a lot in Chinese religion. But anyway, he was doing it so that in people's minds, anything that kept them from believing 100% in communism would be gone. There's nothing to tell you that there's something else, right? Like there's nothing to tell you that like there's another way to live.
Yeah. Does it like so? Like now, in the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't want to be alarmist, right? Like as a public person, you're supposed to be an optimistic person, right? You gotta keep talking about hope. And I will do my best on that, right? But it now feels like the puzzles like fit in. Like the erosion in every single thing is coming together. And in 1 second, it just like a switch. And now we are in the communist revolution might happen in this country. Like just that switch. Like I literally thought like living in Chicago last year during the looting, they were like saying they are going to blow up, Trump Tower. But they don't call them terrorists, right? They want to call white supremacy terrorists, everybody terrorists, but that is not terrorism. So I was so convinced if Trump wins, these people gonna blow up Trump Tower. And we're dead in Chicago. So I was like, how people are okay with this? Like every single day we are losing our rights in this country. And it makes full sense, right? This is how it happened in North Korea. This is how it happened in China and all other countries. And I don't know. I just don't want to be the point where we went too far that we cannot push backwards, right? I just don't know what that point looks like.
Well, so let's try to give a little hope. What do you think can be done to actually fight back against this?
I don't know because, kids go, like at 2-3 years old learning these things in day school. Like I send my child to daycare, they're already exposing to this political correctness nonsense.
Really?
Yes.
Can you give an example?
Oh my gosh, in these classrooms, like when I go, it's like in the communists love these banners, right, Charlie? They love banners of this, like the phrase. And like I was going to the classroom, it's all these banners about we're here to be inclusive, blah, blah, all about like, it's okay. We are equal, but then it's like they really like almost like North Korea virtue signaling how politically correct they are. But like thinking about 2 years always looking at these banners, the first thing they're gonna remember is that like inclusive, we are blah blah, all these things, right? I don't know what they're gonna do to their psychology permanently. And of course, their school reports they give you, there are certain things you cannot tell your kids. They encourage parents to never tell kids no, right? Because that's supposedly, there is advice. So individual turns out they can never do wrong in front of their eyes. So I don't know. Kids are sometimes psychopaths, right? They are very selfish people. Seriously, they cry, they demand, they throw tantrums. You need to socialize them. They have to be civilized, and they don't encourage you those like disciplinary things. Like they send the parents reports, all those things. But they are always about whatever you are, it's okay. Like, of course, whatever is not okay. Most of people are not good. You need to make them good. That's the purpose of education. But they are going to schools where whatever you think is good, as long as you are politically correct. So I'm like, it's daycare, so okay, I'm gonna tolerate it. But afterwards, maybe it's gotta be really homeschooled. I don't know. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, so you meet this generation of people, politically correct, the banners everywhere in their school, like North Korea, all these banners, and growing up with this mindset, the most highest morality is a political correctness, right? Showing your virtue, like signal. What are they gonna do in the world when they grow up, right? What kind of things they're gonna fight for? I'm sure they're not gonna try to empower individuals, for sure not. So I try to be hopeful, but the thing is, yeah, I just hope it's not too late. That's the thing.
Well, you know what gives me hope is that there are people out there like you who have the courage to express their views, even if they're unpopular views. And I hope that more people can find that courage in themselves to knowingly say what they feel is right, and doing that knowing that they could be sacrificing something else. And I think that if a lot of people do that, then the result will actually be that people don't end up sacrificing as much, because we'll start to see that, yeah, there are a lot of people out there that aren't obsessed with political correctness. And if we can all, care for each other and love each other for, regardless of whether you're on the left or the right or some other part of the political spectrum, it doesn't matter. Like, we're all here together, right? And, admire the best in people instead of seeing, this one element of people's view on a particular thing we don't like. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just people having the courage, like you, to, stand up and say, well, here's what I think is the right way to do things.
I think that's a great message for everyone watching, too, because they can take this story and act on it.
I know. Like, so I can even like send to Chris this. So after my Fox thing, there's one classmate from Colombia. Only one sent me text that I felt the exact same way during the Colombia.
Wow.
It was ridiculous, but I couldn't tell you because nobody, it's like in North Korea, right? We cannot tell our minds, right? We cannot ever, it's college, we're free of debate, right? We talk about, discuss ideas. But no, it became a like echo chamber. So I never thought there was somebody thought like me in the class, even though it was discussion class, right? And then she said, I'm working in New York, but I cannot make it public. But just I wanted to then show you my private support. And like, well, this is crazy. So now she's worrying about, of course she should worry about losing her job. She gotta survive, she gotta pay the rent. New York is very expensive to survive there. So I have a compassion for her. But the thing is like this, when I came out, people were saying like, our North Koreans are stupid. Why there is no revolution, right? That was the main question I was getting. People just amused how dumb North Koreans must be that we probably did. And now I'm here like, so if you stand up, what you lose is your reputation, your job. But in North Korea, you killed 3 generations of your family. So how are you not rising up? Like, if you thought North Korea is dumb and not rising up, this makes no sense. Why these people are not doing anything and being silenced like this?
That is a great point.
Yeah.
I also like the idea that, like, if you as a viewer, don't feel like you have the situation where you can publicly say what you believe, but just sending a private message of support to someone else who is, whether they're being canceled or whether they're just saying something that's not commonly accepted, but something that they really believe in. I think just showing that you care about them and you support them and you'll be their friend regardless of that, I think is really important for all of us.
I mean, that's a good step, but I just feel like they want to fire you, fine, get a new job. There are new jobs. You don't be addicted to all these little pleasures of life. Oh, I won't be able to afford my $1,000 iPhone. Oh no, don't have an iPhone. Go camping, sleep on the floor.
Says someone who's his own
Yeah.
boss. boss, though.
Well, yes, because I made a choice and followed my passion. And anyone watching can do that themselves. And when they free themselves, when they free their minds, they can say, oh, you know what? Maybe instead of being stuck in this slave job where I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing,
Yeah.
you have the freedom to do something else.
It's like they say, free your mind and the rest will follow.
The spoon isn't real.
But then comfort is so big, right? These people,
Yeah, they're addicts.
they spend fortune to go, and they are unless they don't get the corporate job, they have no chance paying for it. Unless they like become a like what, right? General people don't become like can make that much if they go to nonprofit, whatever, like small business, right? So only chance for them to paying back is working for a corporation. But the continuation of Colombia, where they are obsessed with diversity of race, not diversity of thoughts. So that's the thing that is such a toxic cycle, right? You go to this expensive school, you get a lot of debt, then only way for you to pay for it is going a corporate job, but then you have to agree with them again.
Yeah.
So why are we doing this?
I think that's why people are realizing these expensive universities are a bad idea. Don't go into debt to go to a school. You have to break this cycle. And ultimately, the choice is yours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is an individual choice. So we are hopeful.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Rise up.
Well, I think there are a lot of things in American society that just make it harder for like a authoritarian ideology to take place here. One, which is, you know, the way that the U.S. system is set up, the way that the government is set up was specifically to limit the power of government. Like that is the thing that the Constitution does, right? Like it limits government's power. So that is a barrier. Another thing is the size of the country is actually a huge barrier. You know, how big America is, but there's 350 million people. So there are places people can go if they want to kind of not live in New York City or LA or Chicago or these places where these things are taking hold.
Quality of life is terrible.
They can go to Texas. Nobody's stopping them. It's not like in China or North Korea where your movement is restricted, right? Like China less than North Korea, but you know, you cannot choose really where to live long term. So like there are these kinds of like freedoms that give Americans the ability to kind of, you know, form local communities that don't subscribe to like Marxist ideologies, to kind of, you know, have alternative things like alternative media. Even like nobody has to go to a state university, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, there are private schools like
Learn a trade.
yeah, like or you know, there are Catholic schools. There are like systems set up in the country where like it's possible to survive and live not in that type of society.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like there's a lot of ways in which there's still a lot of hope in America. And I think what we're seeing with in schools to elementary schools, a lot of parents, like the red line for them is their kids. You know,
you do see a lot of people standing up about critical race theory in schools now.
Yeah. So, and then like when that kind of snowballs, like when there are more stories about vocal parents coming out and talking about this, and then, you know, it kind of gives other people the bravery or confidence to come out and do the same thing. Like I think there are actually a lot of ways in which, like, I mean, I don't think it's like, oh, well, yes, now there's a communist revolution in the U.S. That's not really where we are. But I mean, it does take people, I mean, one, realizing, like, you kind of have to think about, like, what you really believe in and what you're willing to put up with or not, right? And making those choices. So it's not a passive thing. You kind of have to really, like, consider this for yourself. And it's like what you were saying, Yomi, earlier about, like, you have to choose things when you're free. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to make those decisions. And so it's not that, like, everything will be taken care of and you don't have to, like, do anything about it. But I think for people who do want to do something about it, there are a lot of things, and it's not hopeless.
Yeah, I mean, so for me is that's what I used to think, right? But the thing is, at Columbia, every single class, every single day, we debate how the U.S. Constitution was written by this racist, white supremacist, like white men. Why we need to abolish it and rewrite it. And there's a huge movement in every Ivy League school, universities talking about trash U.S. Constitution, right? And the video that I talked about why I support the Second Amendment on YouTube, that video, of course, gets like censored. So my problem is now the power is so solidified in the hands of big tech and media. And this time, of course, Fox talked about my views, but then CNN, New York Times, every other mainstream liberal like media pretend it was just nothing happened there. So imagine, hopefully Fox is still there then, but like on YouTube, they're gonna go cancel you and me, everybody else who has like this like libertarian views. Every podcast carrier is gonna cancel that, like they cancel the Polar, right? Then next generation gonna never hear the ideas that us like supporting the U.S. Constitution, that view, they are never gonna hear it. So that's what I'm thinking. Like there's such a power is so like in the one place, such a huge power in them in the tech media. So and also for the revolution, right? I mean, China is like 1.3 billion people, and they should be there without social media. And it's a huge country with different ethnicity, like 56 different ethnicity in China, right? So I think it's in a way it's for me it's more plausible to do it in the age of social media now in America. And also in order for revolution to happen, it doesn't have to happen every single town. It just gotta happen in the big hot zone, like the hot spot zones that we talk about. Like in their very significant zones, and the rest follows. So I don't know, like it can like become some like that crazy dystopia, but either less, we have to keep the hope and keep fighting and keep talking these views no matter what we get, right? And hope that justice prevails eventually. But like, what option do we have? I think now I'm like really thinking realistic about the danger of America becoming like North Korea. It's not like I'm crazy paranoid person, but now I think like seeing this time like CNN not even mention one single thing about Fox, my interview with them. It's ridiculous. As if they're like living in a different universe. That's the thing, like no matter what, we gotta be hopeful and gotta do the right thing. And hopefully, yeah, we are not gonna be the last generation that will ever free, But that's a possibility. That's why we gotta fight harder. I think that's what it is. Like instead of me, I keep trying to Americans now. I used to be more like that person. Keep telling them there's hope, be hopeful. But I think I want to give them clear picture what can go bad, how it can go so quickly bad. Therefore, now you gotta fight. I don't know what's right, but I think that's how I see it. I am more concerned than way before. I really truly think there's a huge chance that America might lose this battle, especially seeing the infiltration, right? Even in the YouTuber world, there's so many YouTubers get offered to be paid by Chinese like Communist Party to talk about defend their ideology. I cannot say the which YouTuber, but he got like millions of followers and told me that's what happened to him. I couldn't believe it. Even in the YouTuber world, China is controlling, not the only like mainstream media.
Yeah. As you say, the threat is very real, but I mean, fortunately, the communist revolution has not happened yet. We, a little show on YouTube, have the freedom to interview you and get this message out. People can watch it. People can get on. They can still get on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the major social media platforms and talk about this. So it's critical that we use this time now to talk about these things. So
exactly.
Yeonmi, thank you very much for joining us today. This was fantastic and horrifying. And I hope people listening will share this podcast. And I hope they'll check out the interview you did on Jordan Peterson. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Also, and they need to check out your channel as well. do a plug for your YouTube channel?
It's Voice of North Korea. Yeah.
There we go. And we'll have links below to everything.
Yeah. But this was so educational for me even. Thank you guys for doing this.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Always great to have you on.
Thank you. I cannot wait to be back next time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think we need to report Yeonmi Park for dangerous extremist viewpoints. I think they're setting something up.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you see something, say something.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I personally am inspired by Yeonmi Park to move to a solitary lifestyle in the mountains.
Don't worry. I've been watching you guys this entire time.
Because they're so easy to look at?
Yes, that's why.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Shelley.
I hear the gulags have great soup.
I think people have accused me of somehow being some kind of like Chinese plant, like Chinese communist plant on the show.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd say a fern.
I have nice fronds.
That is exactly what I was saying, Shelley.
Okay.
Yes, obviously we're recovering from everything we talked about with Yeonmi. That was a lot. Yeah. But it's a good point for all of us to remember that the threat is real. We need to use this time. We need to use the freedoms we have to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think also for those of us who are liberal to look at what part of what's happening that is illiberal, which is illiberal being, restricting freedom of thought or freedom of speech, and make sure that regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, try to make sure that at least we have an environment where we can have those basic freedoms and celebrate that diversity in each other, of diversity of thought and ideas, and not, cancel each other and instead listen to each other.
I'm pretty sure that goes against everything.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the whole point, is that if we can't have a discussion, then it's North Korea.
Well, yeah, it's not, you can't really even look at it on like the US left-right political spectrum. This is freedom versus communism. That's the two sides.
I think a lot of people will find the talk about communism to be alarmist because, when we think about communism in the US, we might think about the Soviet Union or, North Korea, things like that. And it seems like what's happening in the US is different, or they're talking about different things. But I think we've had the conversation before about how, these kind of communist ideologies, they're really good at using language.
Mm-hmm.
They're really good at using language in different ways. And so the overall thing that we're seeing is kind of two sides in America being pitted against each other to fight. And that is like the dialectic, right? And kind of the struggle. And there was an interesting Perry Link article where he was talking about how in China, struggle is a transitive verb, where you struggle against people. Like we've talked about this before, where you struggle against each other. And in the US, we don't really struggle, but we do cancel each other. So the words are a little different, but what's happening in society, or like the effect of these things, or maybe the purpose of it, is kind of similar in the sense.
Counter-revolutionary and rightist. How different is that from being accused of being alt-right or far-right?
It's whatever the term is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the not okay thing it is to be at that time. Like a racist, or like they're a Nazi. There are a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you have to kind of look beyond the vocabulary to look at what is happening, what the framework is, what is actually the overall thing that's happening, which is two sides, polarized as far as possible, being made to fight each other.
Yeah. So, Chris, are we going to struggle against Shelley?
Until her power starts to tip a little bit, and then I might have to join Shelley to struggle against you. At which point, you and Shelley might have to struggle against me.
All right. I'm sure it'll all work out in the end.
Don't worry,
for
war
one
is
of us.
peace.
That's why it's great to have three people, because then you can all like kind of struggle against each other at one point or another. It's like a tripod of stability.
And on that note, thank you for watching this episode of China Unscripted. Feel free to share it. Links are below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
We'll talk to you next time.